Georg Klein, Escape to Big Time, the magnificent identification of a reading consciousness with the imagined world of the novel, the flight into a wonderful and vast expanse. That could be called escapism, and there are spatial metaphors which suggest themselves to describe the experience. But someone who escapes into a novel is also escaping from a particular time. Every habitual reader, the genre junkie, just as much as the lover of subtle language games, senses and enjoys the fact that he is escaping that time which is constantly being presented to him as the really important, decisive one. This deceitfully dominant time format could perhaps be called small time, in contrast to the grand experience of time in the novel. This small time has something to do with our everyday lives, and its dogmatic champions maintain that dealing with daily life prevents us squandering our always scarce hours on reading, never mind writing novels. An old, threadbare reproach. But who can feel so certain of himself in this respect? Not the sheer practice of the present, but a particular kind of future, a feeling of apprehension, a specific anxiety, indeed cowardice, appeared to me to be the time enemy of the novel.
You seem, Georg, to somewhat bypass the question on the future of the novel by subtitling your keynote speech on the novel and the future. So maybe this is something the others realized, and Sophie wanted to try to comment first.
I think big time is not incompatible with the problem and with this particular zeitgeist, because perhaps what's needed is for us to have lots of heroes rather than one hero who wants to be the star of the novel. If we have lots of different heroes all doing small things separately, maybe not even seeing what they're achieving, that could be a way of addressing the challenges at the moment.
And that links up with what Sophie was talking about the whole question of individualism in the novel. Because the Western novel, I don't think this is a recent thing at all, the Western narrative, right back to the beginning of Western thought, is essentially an individual. Christianity is an entirely individualistic religion where we each have a single relationship with God. And narratives create for us images of people creating their own trajectories in the world. So that when we read novels, the idea of ourself as a person with a story is reinforced. And there are parts of the world where they just don't think like this about life. So that if we begin to get a real mixing of narratives, it may be that our narratives begin to, there'll be a tension between other visions of the world where simply the self is not seen in this way. Even in my own novels, I don't think the characters tell themselves they're going to do something with the causality. They do it because they're wrong and stupid, and then things go wrong. I do think the whole one really big question with narrative is how narrative is linked to self, and how our vision of self is linked to suffering, and how we're constantly telling ourselves stories that are stories about people going through suffering and suffering as dilemma or suffering as economic or whatever, and coming through it, and picturing this noble individual who comes through that.
Maybe we aren't anymore in this national trap of readership. Maybe we should think more of we should think of tribes of readers.
On my way here, I was passing a front store window, and it had the inscription, "Art is nothing to be thought of." And the next sentence was, "Art is," and then my taxi passed by, and I wasn't able to read the end of what art is. But I think one of the problems is that we consider more and more literature is considered more and more as a product, and it goes into the circles of management, of marketing, and so forth. And we are not in the situation to talk about it as an art. And so if art is something not to be thought of, we all should think about what then is art. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sophie. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Georg Klein.
Thank you very much. You see, there were the readers of the future attending us. This discussion leaves me quite optimistic because I heard a sentence which I can think readers and writers will for all time be able to address themselves with. I come from a tribe you don't know. Thank you very much.
We're delighted that this is, of course, part of the Edinburgh World Writers' Conference, and Berlin is the first of various venues as part of the ILB here event in Berlin to be part of that. So this is the first international outreach of the Edinburgh event this year.
Thank you. When we were thinking about where to host this event, we said this is the most proper place. We're looking down on Alexanderplatz, one of the most important places in literature history in Germany. And we said, okay, let's collect a group of writers together here on a Sunday morning, give them a cup of coffee, and then speak about the future of the novel as well as maybe the other subject of the Edinburgh conference, and do it in an informal way, have a really exchange of minds.
You know, the novel coming from the soul, I myself also feel it's a communication between something deeper in people. Johan talked about last night this big time, and I think again, when we really listen and write a novel from a deep part of ourselves, the reader, you know, communicates with that with us. So it's an intimate communication between the writer and the reader taking place with the novel as the bridge.
So story never dies, but book might die. And the story might only exist in internet visualized form rather than with words.
When you're writing a novel, if you really want to go deep, you're just telling a good story, you're making an impact on people, and it doesn't really matter. In the format becomes secondary.
When you compare literature to other art forms, I think the reason it on the surface looks as if we are conservative in the novel is that we, contrary to other art forms, don't work through the immediate sensual response. All other art forms do. From music, we have an immediate response to seeing a sculpture or seeing a painting or video art. So of course, by just changing small things in that form, it seems revolutionary, but that form is that art. Our form, if we are not talking about language or style or something, but the very form of the written word, whether it's on paper or computer, is not our art. Our art takes place in the head of the reader, and there revolutions take place. And over time, there have the huge changes in what novels do and what different writers do. But it's a much deeper level, and therefore much more difficult for the general public or critics to see it. I think it happens over time. Then you see the difference from Dostoevsky and Tolstoy till what happens today. But it's at such, I really think when it really works, that revolution takes place in such a subtle way and such a deep way that we almost can't perceive it and describe it in words.
Coming from Iceland, I occasionally write about glaciers. And so in my early literature, the glaciers, they are the symbol of the constancy of the universe, the eternal glaciers. And now in the novel published in 2008, a dying woman is looking at the glacier, and she says, she thinks you can rely on nothing, even the glaciers are melting.
Hand a child an iPad and they will follow the story with their fingers and their eyes and their ears immediately. Hand a child Ulysses and they're fucked. So, and I think the kids drive the future. The kids are the future of the novel, and I think the novel will dissolve. But people telling stories and people trying to transmit these strange experiences in their heads into other people's heads will continue and will be revolutionized by the new technologies. And so I think the novel will die, but it won't matter.
I wondered if you not mentioned Ulysses as an Irish writer. In Germany, it's difficult. You hand over Berlin Alexanderplatz to a 6-year-old, and he immediately starts and loves it. And you can. This moment, there are hundreds of children. You can see in the World Wide Net now. Germany is a country of literature. There are hundreds of children reading in Berlin Alexanderplatz. This moment, they are waving to us.
thank you for ensuring the future of the novel.
I simply against this attitude of feel so precious about certain form, because that is against the essence of the literature. The essence of literature can be poetry, can be novel, can be prose, can be in theater form, can be in cinema, because essence is the emotion in the stories through the character developing, or emotional progression.
One thing that's been occurring to me when people have been talking about this like sole authorship vision of the novel as this means of communicating an idea from the single author to the reader versus this multi-authorship. I'm probably going to get this word wrong in German now, but is there a Gedankenpalast? Like thought?
Gedankenpalast.
Yeah, thought palace. And I think that's a really good way of thinking of the novel. It's a thought palace. And traditionally it's had this one architect who's been the sort of superstar architect, the Mies van der Rohe or whoever. But that's not the only architecture there is. People also need functional village houses and so on. And I do think the space for a thought palace that's got many architects, as long as everyone's working around the same central concept and has the same plan that they're working to.
So you feel responsible to the dead?
Absolutely, because the dead one is me too, is in me.
The responsibility for the dead. Isn't that a kind of original ingredients of literature as it is of culture at all, in the sense of, yeah, for sure, it was literature always dealt with the suffering. It was telling about the suffering. It gave speech to those who couldn't speak up anymore. This is what you were talking about, the development of the soul. It always incorporated this, yeah, and I think it's in literature from its very origin. It's a crucial element of this. We don't have to speak about whether it's been included in the future or not. It will be. Otherwise, it probably won't be literature anymore.
This is the enormous power of the literature today in a global world, that it can tell us stories that we didn't know before and open up our eyes. And also, so that's very political.
I think that the future of the novel discussion should be a big board with all the shoulds that we can come up with, and then just take them off one by one and say that we must have, we see here, again, I'm saying must. I want variety to be the only sort of principle.
I will not dare to say, I hope that we contribute something to this huge temple of thoughts, but maybe we polished the columns a little bit. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating. Thank you for the kindness of hosting here. And all the children out there, they read books and they want us to come down and sign them for them.